Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Seen Beyond and Through with Monty. Today, we're going to touch on a topic called racism in medicine, in science, in polls, in stats, in numbers. So basically, right before you, you see all great truths begin as blasphemies. And I can adhere to that because when I spoke on this to many people, they had such a dire like and what is the word I'm looking for? Not responsibility, but we are just so enamored with these particular institutions. We are so have our beliefs in tuned with them that we believe them, that they are infallible, that they cannot lie to us, that they will not let us down, that we are so loyal to them. So let's move on. Okay, I'm going to tie this all together. This was back in, I believe, around March or April of this year, where it stated that 70% of people dying from the coronavirus in Chicago were black. The report says. Now, the author who questioned this went on to say, interestingly enough, he goes on to say, this 70% means nothing. And the reason why, because the caveat to collecting this data must be seen and presented. If not, then it's just presumptive diagnosis. That's interesting. And to come to 70% presumptive diagnosis, and it says to let me read this over. Okay, what is the percentage of the black population versus of the others? That's a good question. Were all the dead counted? Another great question. What is the racial percentage of the neighborhood? Demographics. Excellent question. Did everyone who died on a given day timeline get tested? Are deaths being counted from people with underlying diseases, illnesses being attributed to COVID-19 without verification? 70%, 50%, 41% means nothing and should be passed and should not be passed along as fact. I agree with that. Go ahead and read that for yourself. So basically, he's questioning the 70% that they came up with. And it seems like to me that they just pulled this really out of their ass and just were guessing. But we're going to get behind this particular number. And I'm going to show you how it's very false and how the CDC has a history of maligning black people. They have not learned. And from yesterday, when I had presented to you how they had participated in the Tuskegee experiment from 1969 to 1972, and they wanted it to continue. They have not changed their racist ways since then. Okay, more than 80% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients in Georgia last month were black. CDC study finds. Okay, let's get this date right. Okay, this was April the 30th, 2020 of this year. A CDC study released Wednesday found that over 80% of the COVID-19 patients hospitalized in Georgia last month were black. It's the latest analysis showing that communities of color are being hit disproportionately hard by the disease, what they're going to say. Now, is there a reason for them to say this or to come to this conclusion? Yes. What did Melinda Gates say? She stated that blacks should be the first in line to receive the vaccination. So therefore, they are preparing black people to be the very first ones to receive these experimental vaccinations. Let's move on. A study from the CDC, which is headquarters in Atlanta, surveyed 8 hospitals. By the way, people, they're in some of the blackest areas around. The demographics are going to be majority black. Serving 8 hospitals in the state, 7 in Atlanta, metro areas are black area, and one in southern Georgia, In a sample of 305 COVID-19 patients who were hospitalized in March, 247 or 83.2 were black. By comparison, 32 patients, 10.8% were white, and it goes on to say 10. What is that? 10, 3.4% were Hispanic, and 8, 2.7% were Asian or Pacific Islander. Keep that number in mind. Out of 305 COVID-19 patients who were hospitalized in March of this study, 247 were black. That's very important as we move on, because this is the CDC's whole operation, is to make black people the majority of the study's participants, and then put out there that black people are the majority of with this disease, or that disease. It could be COVID-19, it could be herpes, it could be AIDS, it could be tuberculosis, anything. That is their operandus mundi, is to make black people the number one demographic or group with a particular disease or illness. New CDC study shows how hard COVID-19 impacts African Americans in Georgia. What they will also do is that they took this in Georgia, they took it in, I believe, Chicago, and it was another black state, parts of New York, I believe, also, and where the majority of the demographics were black, and they announced that blacks are the hardest hit. 2 white reporters right here are reporting on that. They're not going to dare question the CDC. A new study found more than 80% of COVID-19 patients were African American. See how they put that out there? That's very dangerous to put that out there, because when blacks see this, it's another strike against black people. And what do people start to internalize? It creates a sense of being uncomfortable with yourself, being uncomfortable with other blacks, and it fosters self-hate. Because once again, you are in a negative light shined on by a particular poll or study. Channel 2 news anchor, Jovita Moore spoke with Dr. Jeffrey Hines, medical director of the West State Center for Health Equity, who said that he wasn't surprised by the CDC's findings, but he's hopeful. You're not surprised by their findings? So you expected for blacks to be the number one group hit hard by it? Wow. 3 weeks ago, we told you a story of Bryce Wilson. His mother, Brenda Dale Wilson, told us her 31-year-old son worked in security, loved music and his family. We realized he wasn't getting any better. Dave Wilson said, this was more than just a cold or flu. Okay, she said Bryce was a former football player, and aside from the asthma as a child, he was healthy. This wasn't until he was hospitalized because of COVID-19. With all due respects to her son, I think that whites can say the same thing. I believe that Hispanics can say the same thing. Asians can too. But they take these stories from a single black person and apply it broad base to all black people. CDC. The CDC. Nearly 50% of black women ages 14 to 19 have genital herpes. See the pattern right here? This group is very much racist. This organization is very much against black people. They're not any type of allies of black people. Now, I'm sure that you have black people who work there who can probably had a very good time working there, who can tell you a very good working experience, probably getting paid well, but they are not behind the decision-making process. They are not the ones who make the decisions as to which polls, stats, and surveys are being leaked out there regarding black people. They're pretty much just collecting their paychecks. Yes, the story behind alarming herpes numbers for black women. Remember the story of 305 COVID-19 patients were 305 COVID-19 patients, 247 were black. No differently here. Here's the story behind the numbers. They made black women who were 12% of the female population. In these studies that I have investigated and looked at, they made them 63% of the study's participants. They made white women, who were the majority of the female population, they made them the minority in the study. That's how they flipped it. Anyone should ask yourself whether you're dealing with herpes, or we're going to touch on AIDS later too, any type of sexually transmitted disease that is based upon behavior. What are black people doing that whites are not doing sexually? And here it goes again. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, those guys again, right? Announced that nearly half of African American women are infected with herpes, has prompted reaction from panic to shock to outrage and disbelief. The study finds that women and blacks were most likely to be infected. Okay, sure they're going to find that, because what they're doing is that they're manipulating stats. They're giving you a false number. They are making black people, who are 13% of the U.S. population, the majority of these studies participants. That's how they get the numbers behind these particular studies. That is the story behind the alarming numbers for black women. Let's move on. Almost 2/3 of African American women in a study have been told by, this is a different study, healthcare provider they had an STI in their lifetime. Among the self-reported reported data, the most commonly reported STIs were trichomonias, chlamydia, and gonorrhea. Again, people, what are black women doing that white women are not doing? To be honest with you, not to be mean, I believe that white women are, if not more, are just as promiscuous as black women. But what they're doing is that they are protecting the white population at the expense of black people. And I truly believe a lot of this has to do with them having a reason to go in there to treat black people experimentally. This is impossible. Anything that's based upon behavior, no. You don't have white women saving it. Let's look at chlamydia here. This is the rates of chlamydia reported cases. It says Hispanic ethnicity and sex, United States. But it goes beyond that. I had to enlarge this for you. And when I enlarge it for you, look at this right here. Go down to the, it lists AI, AN. Then it lists Asians. What is that? 159.7. Look at blacks. Are supposedly the number one female group with chlamydia at 141. Look at this. 141, 19.9. Then it goes to Hispanics, who are larger female demographics than black women at this time. 563.8. Then in a HOP, I'm not sure what that means, but then it goes on to white women. Look at this right here. They made damn sure they made them the lowest, 283.3. That's because a couple of things about them manipulating data and doing statistical sleight of hand. They have a tendency to go into government-funded agencies and clinics. At these government-funded agencies and clinics, who are going to be the majority of the people who go there to seek aid, as opposed to a private provider? That answers your question right there. So what they do not do, they do not take, example, 1,000 black women, 1,000 white women, 1,000 Hispanic women. No, they continually oversample black women. They continually and deliberately oversample black women and continually and deliberately undersample white women. Here goes, what is this? USFCA research study on relationships and HIV-related issues up to $180 per couple. Right here, trying to make black, I guess, gay men the face of HIV and AIDS, despite the fact that in America, the LBGT community, whites outnumber blacks like 7-1. And this is very interesting right here. Here, once again, people, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, new research shows that a current diagnosis rates half of black gay men and a quarter of Latino gay men will be diagnosed with HIV within their lifetime. Okay, you leave out white men, despite the very fact that white men outnumber black gay men 7-1. And I'm going to show you something about this right here, though. It's going to shock you. But first of all, why are you even making a prediction like this that's based upon behavior? If it's based upon behavior, behavior can be changed. It's almost like you're trying to speak something into existence that you want to happen. And basically the focus right here is on African American or Latino men. Someone wrote down here, crossed it out very good. He put down lies right here, which is very good. It is nothing but lies there. It seems like they're operating from the false notion that the number of gays in America are black. It's not. Okay, black gay men reject a lifetime HIV risk estimates in the new CDC report. Well, good they did. Because let me tell you something. Gay white men are not going to come to your aid. They're not going to help you out. They're not going to reject it. They're not going to stand in with the CDC and fight for you. They're not going to fight against the CDC. Whether it be AIDS, herpes, chlamydia put on black gay men, rectal type of diseases, they're going to just let you guys have it. Even though it can be proven that it's a lie, they are not going to come to the defense of gay black men. These are some of the gay black men who spoke out against that, because what they were saying right here is what this article that I'm going to bring up is going to say. And it's going to expose the lie right here. Okay, here's what it says. HIV rates in young gay black men strikingly higher despite fewer risk behaviors. Did you hear that? Strikingly higher despite fewer risk behaviors. Let's read. Northwestern University investigators exploring the racial disparity of HIV acquisition found that young black men who have sex with men are 16 times more likely to be infected with HIV than young white gay men. Perhaps what's more noteworthy is that young black gay men reported lower sexual rates of sexual risk behaviors, fewer sexual partners, more lifetime HIV tests, according to results of the study published in the Journal of Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndromes. We have known from prior studies that the paradoxes exist. Black young men who have sex with men engage in fewer risk behaviors, but have much higher rates of HIV diagnosis. Senior study author Brian Mastake, PhD professor of medical research science at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, and director of the Northwestern Institute of Sexual Behavior and Gender Minority Health and Well-Being, said in his statement, "Our study illuminates how HIV disparities emerge from complex social and sexual networks and inequities and access to medical care for those who are HIV positive. A long-term cohort study included data from 1,015 gay men between the ages of 16 and 29 who live in Chicago, and also factored in physiosocial characteristics as well as information about social, sexual, and drug use behaviors. According to the data, young black gay men had a higher prevalence of HIV, 32%, and erectile sexually transmitted infections 26.5%, but the lowest number of sexual partners, more frequent HIV tests, and experienced greater levels of stigma, victimization, and trauma, childhood sexual abuse. Overall, young black MSMs, men sex with men, do not report higher rates of HIV risk behaviors like condom sex. Study cohorts, Ethan Morgan, PhD, said in a statement, but aspects of their social networks align with increased HIV risk. By learning more about young black MSM social networks, we can better understand what drives such persistent racial disparities in HIV and close the gap. Center for Disease Control has reported that gay and bisexual men accounted for 67% of all HIV diagnoses in 2016. Of those, African Americans comprise of 38%. Okay, this is despite having the lowest risk factors. Okay, African Americans comprise of 38%, followed by Hispanic Latino men, 29%, whites, 28%. The population of HIV positive black gay men also tends to be younger. 75% were between the ages of 13 and 34 in 2016. Okay, Dr. Mustanowski and his team believes their results suggest that network interventions and those addressing social determinants may help reduce the disparity. Their study showed the social and sexual networks are more dense and interconnected, which from an infectious disease standpoint makes infections transmitted more efficiently through the group. Dr. Mustanaki said in a statement that coupled with the higher HIV prevalence in populations means any sexual act has a higher chance of HIV transmission. Dr. Mustanaki and your group, what you guys overlooked, I don't know if this deliberately, or if you're being foolish, or if you're afraid, you're overlooking the fact that the CDC is oversampling black gay men. It's just that simple right there. You're failing to look at the fact that white gay men in America outnumber black men 7-1. You're failing to look at, let's just go with HIV, what I touched on yesterday. Remember what I touched on yesterday? It talked about how HIV and AIDS came through the experimental hepatitis B vaccine that was given in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles between 1978 and 1980. At that particular time, those studies, 99.9% of those participants were white gay men. A couple of years later, HIV and AIDS comes on the scene. Now follow me here. The majority of gay white men prefer gay white men. The majority of gay white men are having sex with other gay white men. It is impossible for black men who have lower risk factors, who are lower in numbers, to suddenly and dramatically have to pass up gay white men in HIV and AIDS or any disease. Because up until about a couple of years ago, this is 2016, so up until about 3 or 4 years ago, the majority of the HIV AIDS cases were white men. Now, here's the thing with that. For this to have happened with a group with less risk factors and lower in numerical numbers, they would have had to, for a 15-year period, double their sexuality tenfold. They would have had to, for that particular period, double their sexuality with the men who are HIV positive. There is no place in history that showed that gay black men doubled their sexuality by tenfold and started having unprotected, bareback sex with white men who are HIV positive. There's no proof of that. That did not happen in history. What is going on in history is that the CDC, as I have showed you, even with COVID-19, they have taken 305 patients. What is that, 267 or whatever? The vast majority of them were black. The exact same thing with black women and herpes. They'll make 12% of the female population 63% of a study group. They will make gay black men, who are the minority, they will make them the majority of the study groups. The samples will be taken from government-funded clinics where black men are more likely to use, as opposed to private clinics. You're going to have to do a study based upon the economic disparities between white gay men and men of color, and you will get a better understanding of that. And it's strange how this guy right here who did the study failed to even mention that the CDC's oversampling of certain demographics of a population to come to a definitive conclusion. So that just shows you people right then and there how this particular agency has it in for black people. They cannot be trusted. They're not on the sides of black people. They are not going to tell the truth. The LGBTQ white community is not going to come to the aid of black LGBTQ people. Gay white men are not going to come to the aid of gay black men. White women are this feminist movement. They're not going to come to the aid of black women. They're going to leave black women out there to dry, making it seem like you have all these STIs and they don't. It's like a competition game that some groups enjoy playing. We have to be number one. We have to be better than them. We have to be more pure and more clean than that particular group. The lies are there. And unfortunately, people are not going to speak out to straighten these lies, which is one of the reasons why I started my channel, because I knew the lies, the disparities were there, and I've seen them because I've been studying this for years. And so for you to start your own study, do your own research, and then again, understand the devil you are dealing with. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that is another edition of Seen Beyond and Through with Monty. And I will see you beyond and through.